This just into CNN, big Democratic donor George Clooney, of course, the actor, has just called for President Biden to step aside. CNN's Arlette Saenz joins us now from the White House. Arlette, obviously, this is not going to be welcome news over there. What can you tell us?
No, it won't be, Jim. And this is a significant new New York Times op-ed from actor George Clooney. Now, to remind viewers, George Clooney was one of those celebrities that headlined a major Los Angeles fundraiser with President Biden back in June. And today, he is saying that he believes it is time for President Biden to step aside from this 2024 campaign. Now, George Clooney wrote extensively about President Biden, saying, "We are not going to win in November with this president." He recounted being with Biden at that fundraiser, saying, "It's devastating to say it, but the Joe Biden I was with 3 weeks ago at the fundraiser was not the Joe big effing deal Biden of 2010. He wasn't even the Joe Biden of 2020. He was the same man we all witnessed at that debate." He goes on to say, "Our party leaders need to stop telling us that 51 million people didn't see what we just saw. We're also terrified by the prospect of a second Trump term, that we've opted to ignore every warning sign." This is significant as, of course, George Clooney holds a very large platform. He is well known, but he has also been a longtime Democratic supporter, fundraising not just for Joe Biden, but also for former President Barack Obama. Now, it comes, as you have heard, these deep reservations expressed from various wings of the Democratic Party, from some lawmakers up on Capitol Hill, some donors also indicating that they are concerned about what it would mean to have President Biden at the top of the Democratic ticket in November after that debate. And now you are hearing George Clooney, a key Democratic supporter, key actor, key activist, adding to that chorus of calls for President Biden to step aside. Now, President Biden and his team are simply charging ahead with this campaign at this moment. President Biden right now is speaking at an AFL-CIO meeting as he's trying to shore up support among union leaders who the campaign believes would be key heading into a November election. But certainly this is another pressure point for President Biden as they are having a major Democratic name call for him to step aside at this moment.
Yeah, Arlette, they're not going to be happy about that. And speaking of the president being at the AFL-CIO, the big union that's headquartered here in Washington, he was just speaking there moments ago. Let's listen to a bit of that and hear what he had to say.
Hey, folks. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Please sit down, sit down. Hey, look, number one, you know, the way I look at it, I was thinking about this last night, knowing I'm going to be here and going from here to the NATO summit. You know, we have two strong organizations in America that I look to for our security. One, literally, and I mean this sincerely, is NATO. NATO, a joint assembly of democracies that made sure we're keeping the peace and no one's going to screw around with us, the strongest it's ever been. And I think of you as my domestic NATO. Not a joke. Not a joke. You're the ones beyond me, and you know this better than I do, beyond me. It's all about whether or not we're going to grow the economy, whether we're going to give working people a shot. And I told you, and you know, because a lot of you were there with me all the way back when I was a kid, and I'm only 42, but when I was a kid back running for the Senate when I was 29 years old, Labor elected me. And we were then a right-to-work state, and we changed it all. And here's what we're doing. You've heard me say it 1,000 times, I'm going to say it again. The middle class built this country. You built the middle class. No. And by the way, I don't want to hurt your reputations, but even Wall Street's acknowledging your power. No, I'm serious. Look at every projection about what we want to do with the economy on the issues that we're talking about and what the other guy wants to do. They're supporting us. It's your agenda we're working on. And by the way, I've said from the beginning that when labor does well, everybody does better. Not a joke. That's not a talking point. That is a reality. You know that, Lee. That is a reality. It is an absolute reality. When we were I said I was going to be the most pro-union president in American history. Well, guess what? I am, and I'm staying there.
All right, that's President Biden right there at the AFL-CIO headquarters. here in Washington as he tries to shore up support in certain corners of the Democratic Party. Of course, the breaking news we just heard a few moments ago, actor and Democratic Party supporter George Clooney calling for President Biden to step out of the race. I want to bring in our CNN senior data reporter, Harry Enton. I mean, Harry, one of the reasons why there is all of this consternation, we saw the former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi opening the door to President Biden making the decision to get out of this race, even though he has said he wants to stay in. We're seeing a lot of movement in these battleground polls, and I'm wondering if you could walk us through that, show us why there's some heartburn, a lot of heartburn in the Democratic Party right now.
You know, Jim, we've been talking a lot about the national polls, but of course the race is won or lost in the Electoral College. And I just really want to give an indication here that Donald Trump is favored at this particular point. That's the bottom line. You know, if the election were held today, according to the Cook Political Report, 268 electoral votes are either leaning or solid in his direction versus just 226 for Joe Biden. The only real toss-ups are up here in the Midwest, right? Wisconsin, Michigan, and down in the Great Lakes in Pennsylvania. And I will tell you, Jim, that I've been looking and talking with folks on the internal polls in these individual states up here in that Midwest region. These polls do not look good for Joe Biden at this particular point. Donald Trump is leading in these internal polls. And then, of course, Arizona, down here in Nevada, Georgia, all states that Joe Biden won last time around, all of them leaning towards Donald Trump at this
And
hour.
if he doesn't win those blue wall states, it's over. That's it.
If he wins, if he doesn't win
He has to
any
run
one
them
of
all.
these, he has to run the table. He has to win all of these states. And I know from the internal data that I've been talking to folks, he's not ahead in a single one of them right now.
Let's discuss with CNN political commentator and former Obama White House senior advisor Ashley Allison and former Trump administration official Matt Mowers. Ashley, let me go to you first on this George Clooney news. We saw the president visiting the AFL-CIO a few moments ago. Obviously, he's trying to shore up support with certain parts of the Democratic Party base. But how big of a blow is that to have George Clooney say, you know what, Mr. President, you need to step aside?
Look, it's not great to have someone who just held a very large fundraiser for you to come out and withdraw their support. I think the thing that is really hard about the comments in the letter is not that he is just saying this based off of the debate performance, but he compared the debate performance to his actual direct interaction with the president. And I think that the campaign, everyone who saw the debate a couple of weeks ago have been saying to the president, we need you to prove to us that you are able to do it. And people are still waiting for that proof point. Now, I think they are doing a good job getting him out there, having conversations with people, but it's not a great sign. And I don't want to sugarcoat it. When you hear the polls that Harry Enton is saying that he is down, people know the threat that Donald Trump is to our democracy. And so when the polls are where they are, we need a couple things to help it to get easier. And a letter like that doesn't make it any easier.
And Matt Mowers, I mean, one of the things that we've noticed about Donald Trump lately is we haven't seen a whole lot of him. He was out at a rally last night, but he's been sort of laying low. And I mean, this is sort of politics 101. You're just going to let if your opponent is struggling, you're going to let that continue to happen. This is what the Trump campaign wants right now.
Yeah. I mean, look, of course, we're right. You know, we've got Ashley Allison and I agreeing on something, which is that this is bad for Joe Biden. That is not going to happen every single day. And, you know, I've said this a few times now, and I mean this purely figuratively, but there's the old adage in politics and really anything else in life, when your opponent's committing suicide, don't commit homicide. Donald Trump doesn't need to do anything right now. You've got the Democratic Party eating itself. It's been happening now for months. For a while, it was happening on policies, right? It was happening on what was going on in Israel and those who took a different side and were supporting, you know, essentially supporting Hamas. You had, issues around that going on. You had the base dispirited on other issues. Now it's all about whether they believe Joe Biden is capable of even serving. I mean, I just don't know. And here's the biggest problem, I think, for Joe Biden. If I was the Biden campaign, this would be my concern every single day. This doesn't necessarily go away, right? Everyone's going to be watching every single interview from now through November. They're going to be watching every single speech from now through November, and they're going to look for any single misstep or miscue to grab onto. Now, look, based on what we're seeing now, Joe Biden's performance in the debate, George Clooney saying in private that privately Joe Biden's that same person in private, other Democratic congressional leaders who after years of saying Joe Biden's fine, trust us, are now coming around saying he can't serve. We really don't believe, and most Democratic members of Congress probably don't believe, that he can have an error-free campaign from now through November, and that's going to be the issue for Joe Biden.